Hello, everyone. This week on the Average joGamer podcast, we talk about Xbox's Phil Spencer talking multi-platform. We talk about the Switch 2 and sales for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 3 of the Average joGamer podcast. We got a little bit to talk about today. We are going to start out with one of the bigger things, in my opinion, Phil Spencer. He had an interview recently on a podcast called Gamer Tag Radio. Check them out, Gamer Tag Radio. They had a podcast where they interviewed Phil Spencer for about a half hour. I'm not going to talk about everything that they went over, but I do want to talk about some of the notes that he said about Xbox's future, multi-platform. He mentions the Switch 2, for example, and just the state of Xbox overall. So, again, check out Gamertag Radio. This is where this comes from. It's a really good interview. They asked him some pretty good questions. If you want to watch the full thing, head over there. But some of the stuff that I wanted to mention are mainly the question, which I love that they asked, is pretty much why should anyone own an Xbox? Now, before we get to Phil answering that question, before they get to that question, they kind of talk about Phil's and Xbox's stance currently on multi-platform gaming. For those that are not aware, a lot of the Microsoft first-party games are kind of going all over the place, right? They're releasing on PlayStation. There's rumors that they're going to be coming out on the Switch 2. They've already had some things obviously come out on Switch 1, but more and more games are going multi-platform under the production of Xbox. Stuff like Indiana Jones, which recently came out. Right now, yes, is Xbox exclusive. You can play it on PC as well, but next year, or I think sometime this year, I think later this year, it's coming out on PlayStation as well. There's already been some other games that came out via Xbox. I think Doom, the new Doom, Dark Ages, I think is day and date supposed to be with PlayStation. So he kind of talks about that, and he mentions a few things about how he's not really a fan of the history of, I don't want to say he's not a fan of the history, but he's just, basically the way that gaming has worked, in his words, is that a console comes out and a game is tied to that console, right? Which is pretty much true. You come out with the Super Nintendo, everything's out for the Super Nintendo. PlayStation 1, it's pretty much for the PlayStation 1. PS2 had backwards compatibility, and then PS3 did, and then it didn't, and then PS4 didn't, and now PS5 does, but only with PS4. So, I mean, he doesn't call out Sony in that, but he's just talking about, in general, games are usually stuck to their platform. And he just mentions that it's not really fair. The creators that he's talked to, he says, creators of games have said that they want their games to be available to as many people as possible, which makes sense, right? I mean, even Square Enix recently with Final Fantasy VII has said that multi-platform is probably going to be the way to go with Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. Just because, I mean, obviously it makes sense, right? The more areas you can buy the game, the more money you're going to make. And the more acclaim you get, because it's everywhere. So they kind of talk about, they ask him all those kind of questions, and they talk about, when they're asking it, like, this is an Xbox. That's their latest ad campaign, right? Where you see a PC monitor, and it says, this is an Xbox. You see a TV, this is an Xbox. You see a phone, this is an Xbox. And it's basically just saying you can stream Xbox lifestyle anywhere. And the reason I say lifestyle and not really console is because, in my opinion, it feels like they're getting away from consoles. And they've said that they're going to come out with another console this year, and I do believe them on that. But I just think eventually, I think it's either going to go away or it's just going to look differently, and I'll get to that in a second. But I want to talk about when they straight up ask him, that the worry around the internet is, why would you own an Xbox if you want to have this stuff everywhere, and if it's available everywhere? Why would someone choose an Xbox? And even though I agree with Phil on some of this stuff, I think he honestly dodged that question. He basically says that box is in the name of the Xbox, so that means that it's a core thing to Microsoft and to the game studios and Xbox. And he wants their hardware to win, but he wants the hardware to win based on the hardware of that, whatever that hardware can do. If I'm even making sense with saying that, pretty much it's saying that, at least how I took it, is that, okay, if I play a game, or if Xbox games are able to be on PC, then not everyone really is going to own a PC. And he didn't say this part about, people won't have these other options or whatever, but how I'm gathering it is, yes, if you own a PC, there is no point in owning an Xbox console. But if you do still want that couch, just sit down on a couch in your living room, maybe you don't want it on your, computer desktop or whatever it is, maybe then an Xbox would be a good choice, because it's just going to be native to everything that you already do. Right now, Sony obviously is pretty closed off with Microsoft. They're not going to allow, Game Pass to be on Sony platforms. So if, theoretically, everything, including Sony, went multi-platform, I think the idea is that, okay, not everyone's going to have a computer, so let's just sell something that you can have on your TV that can do everything. I think that they do want to become the Netflix of gaming with Game Pass, and I think that having some sort of a dedicated TV device, like it's not even a console anymore, it's just a dedicated TV device, like a Chromecast, like an Amazon Fire Stick, right? Where it's like not every TV is going to have Fire Stick or Amazon services built in, so they sell something to be able to do that. And I think that's where they're going to go forward with their consoles, is like, that's just how you connect it to your TV, if you want to. You can stream it if you have the internet capabilities of doing that, or the money to pay monthly for that. But if not, there's always just the set-top box, right? The console that you can just select and use that. In my opinion, it also kind of sounds like they're going after more Steam than they are going after Sony or anything else. I think it's been clear for generations now that they cannot compete in the console market. If they did not have Microsoft's wallet, then they would not be able to last in the console industry. And I'm not trying to bash Microsoft in saying that. I don't want to kind of have a fanboy argument here. I just think that, and based on some of the stuff that's come out about how, they almost failed with the original Xbox, but then they were able to keep going with the 360 and all these things, without Microsoft's backing, they probably wouldn't have been able to pull off some of the things they pulled off. To financially recover from the Xbox 360, and then to basically fail console-wise, popularity-wise, they've been losing since the 360 was over with. The 360 obviously was very, very popular. Sony kind of edges it out at the end of the console race there, thanks to a turnaround they did, and then thanks to just Sony being more popular in Japan and Europe than Microsoft is. Anyway, what I'm trying to get to is that I think because they're trying to do the whole Netflix of gaming with Game Pass, and they're looking more at things as a service, I think they're going after Steam, personally. They'll share with Steam, sure. There's going to be games that'll be sold on Steam, but I think in their head, because Steam's already tried to do things at home. They've had a home console, and it didn't do well at all. They sold a controller and everything. But Steam is very popular with the Steam Deck and obviously PC. But if Microsoft and Xbox can do the same thing that Steam's doing, and they can do it on PC, they already have a foot in the console world. So they would be able to lock that down as well. And then you could have, which he does mention, you can have your game saves, your cross saves, all that stuff is going to be accessible everywhere. It'll be accessible on your Xbox console, on your PC, on your phone, on your tablet, everywhere. And that sounds awesome. That makes sense. Because right now, again, I've talked about this briefly. I am a Steam Deck owner, and I freaking love the thing. And one of the cool things about it, the little that I do play on PC, I can be on my PC and then on Steam, and then close my game out, and then pick up my Steam Deck later, and I can get my saves going that way. Cloud, as long as I'm on the internet, I can cloud those saves together. It hasn't totally been headache-free doing that. There was a couple issues with, I think, Red Dead Redemption because of logging in and stuff like that. But once I got that fixed, I was good to go. So I don't want to sit there and say that it's perfect, because it's not. But just the idea of that's great. And he brings this up about Nintendo, which he's also right. I mean, Nintendo kind of started this with the Switch, which is funny because before I watched this interview today, I was talking to my buddy GM last night about this, and we kind of mentioned the Switch too, right? Brought up the fact that the Nintendo Switch really made it popular, because Nintendo's always been good at handheld. They kind of made it popular that, maybe somebody will carry something around a little bit bigger, because they can bring their games everywhere. I mean, how perfect is it that you can play Zelda, Breath of the Wild, or Mario Kart at home on a console, and then just pick the thing up and take it with you? And then Steam, with the Steam Deck, building off of what the Switch did, showed that people will pay more money for more power. And it's a larger device, a heavier device, but they will pay it if the performance is good. They will pay the money for it. And these other companies like ROG Ally and all these other things that are doing their handhelds are working as well, to the point where even Xbox and Sony are talking about making their own handhelds. Sorry, I got off a little off topic there, but basically that's what I kind of wanted to say, was that he dodges the question a little bit, because you can't just come out and say that, no, we're going to, be done with console gaming. I think he just wants to create an ecosystem, and part of that is kind of like a Steam ecosystem, but / Netflix. Phil is right about the fact that the games that we invest in, they should work everywhere. Your game saves, for example, should also go everywhere. I totally agree with that. He mentions that Steam operating system is a great operating system, and talks about how important shells are, because SteamOS is a Linux shell, and it kind of blocks you from things like that. And then Microsoft is obviously running on Windows. It's a Windows-based system, the Xbox, I mean. So they're just talking about improving those. Again, they continue the interview. They ask him about some of the newer stuff that's coming out. They kind of talk about the past, the Xbox 360, because this is kind of like an anniversary of the podcast. Again, Gamer Tag Radio. So if you want to kind of dive in more of that, again, I suggest giving that a listen. It's about 26 minutes, 27 minutes in total. Definitely a good listen. Phil has always been great about being vocal about how he feels about the industry, whether he's a businessman. At the end of the day, people that get mad about what he's saying or whatever, or get happy about what he's saying, he's still a businessman. He's got to say what he can and cannot say. He needs to be smart about his product. So again, he's not going to be candid and say, oh no. Let me take that back. He has been candid in other interviews talking about how Sony has beaten him in the console wars. So he's been candid on that side of it, but he can't fully sit there and say, oh no, we don't care about consoles anymore. He's not going to say that, because people are still buying the thing. again, I think they still are going to make, just to end this real quick, I do think they're going to continue to make hardware. I just think it's going to be different from what we've grown up with. It's more of a companion. It's just another way to access it. It's not everyone likes buying PCs, so they're still going to continue to play these games, and they will continue to do that on Xbox hardware if they so choose to do so. Now, in the future, I still don't see why. I feel like if Xbox is everywhere, then I would rather just buy a PlayStation. That way I can play the PlayStation games, or I'd rather buy a PC. That way I can play some PlayStation titles that come to Steam like a year later, and I can still play the Xbox games. Or I'd rather buy a Nintendo because of their massive library. It's an interesting time. It's going to be interesting to see what continues to happen with Microsoft and their games and their services. So we're going to wait for the future on that. Just a quick note, though, about him talking about the Switch 2, and he was kind of praising that announcement. I did not really mention the Switch 2 in the first 2 episodes of this podcast. Reason being, it was being leaked so much that it kind of just felt like this was common knowledge at this point. This thing's coming out, and then when they did announce it, it wasn't really a whole lot to be announced. They are doing a Nintendo Direct, I believe, on April 2nd. So that podcast after the Nintendo Direct will be much more focused on the Nintendo Switch 2, as to now where it's just kind of like, hey, yeah, it's out, it's bigger, it looks neat. There was a Mario Kart that was teased. That's all we really have, except for leaks. That's all we really have to go by. I'm also going to be skipping this week in gaming history, this day in gaming history, whichever one it is. I kind of just wanted to talk more about Final Fantasy VII. So this is more current news instead of history news. Final Fantasy VII last week on the 23rd was released on PC. I believe this was a much faster release than Remake was from PlayStation to PC. So this came out very, very quickly, and I think that benefited Square Enix because they kind of talked about how the sales weren't as great as they wanted them to be. And according to the reports from Steam database, they were able to surpass 40,000 concurrent players on Steam over the weekend. So again, this was released on the 23rd, and then over the weekend, it set a peak concurrent player about 40,564 players. We'll keep an eye on that, see if it gets any higher or not. But for comparison, the first remake, or part 1, I should say, I think their peak was about 13,800 something, and then Final Fantasy 16, which came out last year, not part of 7, but just Final Fantasy 16, reached about a little bit under 28,000. So, very good news for Square Enix that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did much better than that and jumped all the way up to 40,000. Again, I cannot stop praising this game. Now, obviously, this didn't do as good as Final Fantasy 14. Final Fantasy 14 did really, really well when Endwalker was released. That had like around 95,000 concurrent players, but still, this is a single player game, so it's a little bit different. It is also Steam Deck verified, which is great. So take it on the go, play it on your PC, whatever you want to do. Modding community is gonna do some mods with that, make certain things load better or whatever they want to do. This is nothing but good news. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth to me was last year's game of the year. I do admit that I didn't play a whole lot, but it just, Final Fantasy Remake had a lot to live up to, and it did a pretty good job. It was not perfect by any stretch of the means. It had some issues, and even some of the mini games and stuff weren't that great. It was definitely fun to explore that world in that graphical setting, but I think, with Rebirth, which is part 2, the fact that thing is much more open world And they sincerely listened to the gripes of Remake. And again, one of the gripes was the minigames. Well, the minigames in Rebirth are fantastic. Um, there's a couple that kind of get a little hard or whatever, but there's so much variety in that game. When you get to a new section of the map, it just there's even more mini games to be had, and then you go to the Golden Saucer, and there's even more on top of that, and they're fun. There's a few times in that game that maybe I get a little bit tired, but as soon as I got to that point of maybe getting a little bit tired of some sort of a repetition, something new came out and refreshed it. And so that open world tiredness went away instantly. I just think they did an excellent, excellent job with Rebirth. It's one of those weird things where I really want everyone to play it, but obviously you need to play Remake first before you play Rebirth. And it's not that I don't recommend Remake. It's just one of those things where it's like, if someone says that they're not really enjoying Remake, if they enjoy the combat, great. I think you should. I think you should also enjoy the characters. But if they say some of the gameplay is a little off, like some of the side stuff and some of the pacing or whatever it is, or it's too linear, that's when I would want to kind of emphasize, I get it, I understand, you can definitely have that opinion. Well, it's fixed tenfold in Rebirth. So I'm going to keep championing that game. Yeah. That's current gaming news going on right now. Again, Phil Spencer, we talked about. Very thankful for that podcast. January is usually kind of a dry month, so it's kind of interesting to be able to talk about that. And then, of course, the Switch 2 announcement. Again, like I said, I'll talk more about that in April. What else I've been doing recently? Still, obviously, Star Wars Galaxy Heroes. I don't really have any progress to that. Conquest is going on right now, so I'm trying to reach the 530 crate. I think I should be able to reach it this time around. I did not reach it last time, and it was kind of out of laziness. Not even kind of out of laziness, it was all the way out of laziness. That was during the holiday weeks, right? So I kind of just slacked a lot. And that was also right before we moved guilds, so yeah, I wasn't really paying attention to Conquest as much as I probably should have to be further in my farming. But, yeah. Oh, did unlock Reva, so I'm going to have to work on that, but that's, again, a later date. I'm Ahsoka and Mandalore still, at the moment, main focus. The other things I want to do, I still have not streamed, and I still want to stream Resident Evil Remake from back in the day. And because it's been a long time since I played that game, and the itch, I need to scratch that itch. It's creeping up. That game is a warm blanket, and I want to wear that blanket. Again, also, yeah, Shadow of Mordor, all that stuff. I want to play those. I want to stream them. I really, really do. I'm in the mood to stream them. It's just hard with the apartment, and it's a lot of loud noises in this apartment. I don't have an actual dedicated room. I have a loft, which doesn't help with the noise because it just travels up there. So I'm gonna try and figure something out. If not, I'm just gonna have to play them, and I'll talk about them on this podcast. But I'd rather do both. But yeah, that's all we got for this week's episode of the Average Joe Gamer podcast. I really, really appreciate everyone that's been diving in with me here and listening. And shout out especially to GM who listens to all these. And I can kind of shoot back and forth with him what he thinks, what should I work on, because I know I need to work on a lot. I'm going to have to continue to work on a lot. I hope this episode was definitely better than episode 2. I'm personally not a fan of episode 2. This one hopefully is a little bit more focused on what we're doing. As far as this day in gaming and this week in gaming, just some more house cleaning here. I really do enjoy that, even if it's just a brief what was released in, couple, years ago or whatever, 20 years ago, 5 years ago. If anything of note comes up as a release anniversary, I like kind of mentioning that. But I might scale back on them and not always do them week to week. Maybe just do them once a month, unless something crazy happens where there's some really good bangers in there, good information. Not everything is going to be Tiger Woods, South Park hidden episodes, right? Sometimes it's just a boring week, and there's just some games that no one really cares about that were released 17 years ago. So I'm trying to think of a way to kind of just get some of that information out, but maybe not focusing on it as much. And then when it is something interesting, then obviously we'll dive in. So it's not going away. You just might not see it every week, is the too long didn't read of that explanation. But yes, thank you all so much for listening. I hope to get some streams in, and if so, I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week. See you next time.